Hello everybody, my name is Benjamin Bloom and it's the first weekend of January, so I am off to the FA Cup third round between Ipswich Town and Sheffield United. But all my Twitter seems to say this morning is how meaningless the cup is and how nobody really cares. Now, if you support Ipswich have not won an FA Cup game since 2010. And yes, Ipswich have been stuck in the same division for 16 years. But one of the main reasons they have not won an FA Cup game in, well, how many seasons is that? Six seasons now, 7 seasons, can't even add it up. Is that it's not really that important anymore. Now, people of a certain age get very cross when you say that it's not very important, but unfortunately that's the truth. So I am 35. When I was growing up, I'm trying to think, the first one I remember would have been Ian Wright, Crystal Palace v Man United. Ian Wright broke his leg like twice in the season and came back in the FA Cup final and scored twice, and it was amazing. And Alex Ferguson was going for his first trophy for Man United. Seems a long time ago. Anyway, at that point the FA Cup was very important. It was kind of, other than the league, the biggest showcase, and I think the most important thing is it was watched by the most people. So FA Cup final would be the only time you'd see a football match on terrestrial TV for some people all season. I know they would have the big match and stuff on, it would have been ITV in the late 80s, but if you can imagine, FA Cup Saturday TV would start at like 9 a.m. and people would honestly watch the coverage. Whole family would come over until, I don't know, 5:30, 6 p.m. Sometimes the final would have extra time as well. Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. But through the 90s, it was brilliant. So after World Cup 90, there was the whole Gascoigne FA Cup, where he must have scored in most of the rounds for Tottenham, and then he scored obviously the ridiculous free kick in the semi-final against Arsenal at Wembley, and then in the final, obviously the tragic, he smashed up his knee and was never really the same. And then through the 90s, I remember obviously Dalglish quitting in the FA Cup for Liverpool, and then Souness coming in, and that was his first trophy. And then Arsenal did, Ian Wright again. Arsenal did a cup final double over Sheffield Wednesday. And then you get the Cantona years where you have Man United beating Chelsea 4-0. That was the first double. It was vitally important. Then Joe Royle, another great Ipswich Town manager, his Dogs of War team beating Ferguson's Man United. I think that would have been a double if they'd have won that day as well. And then another Cantona final, where there's a horrible final, but Liverpool wear the white suits and he smashes it through the crowd. And then Arsene Wenger comes and he wins the double in his first season. And I remember I finished my GCSEs the day before and had my first ever hangover, and Nicolas Anelka goes through and Arsenal win the double, and everything's changed, and there's someone who can challenge Alex Ferguson, and that statement was made. And then even more so the next year, Man United do the treble, and that incredible cup semi-final, Man United versus Arsenal, Keane versus Vieira, Beckham, Keane, Giggs and Scholes across one midfield, Vieira, Petty, Overmars and Parlour across the other, Bergkamp and Anelka and Cole and York. Oh, it was beautiful. Man United get to the final, win that against Newcastle, and then I think the thing that then did for it, Man United win the Champions League about 3 days later to do the treble. And all of a sudden you realise that as soon as Man United win the Champions League, that the FA Cup is no longer the most important thing. So from sort of, I think Marseille won the first one probably in 1992. I might have my years wrong there. So the Champions League starts to build up, and instead of being a straight knockout tournament, it goes to group phases, and you have a whole league tournament through the winter, and you start to get to know not just the greatest personalities from England, but from all over Europe, and all of a sudden that becomes the most watched, and that becomes the most prestigious tournament. So most people say the FA Cup died when Manchester United didn't enter it in it would have been 2000. So Manchester United have to go and play in the World Club Cup, or the Club World Cup, whatever it's called, for the winners of the Champions League. Obviously no English team had won the Champions League, and don't get cross with me and say, oh, Liverpool won the European Cup and whatever. The Champions League is different. It's a completely different thing, with the whole league of games where you can get used to, and the television coverage of everything, and to the point now we have a Tuesday and a Wednesday pretty much every week through, you know, large periods of the season. You're seeing these great European clubs and these great European players. So although it was a tipping point, I think it had been building and building as the Champions League built up through the 90s, and then with Manchester United winning it, proving that an English team can actually do it, there kind of dies the FA Cup. Not dies a horrible death, but in terms of being the most important, most televised, most watched thing that you can do with your football club if you're an English football club. So the Cup has kind of tailed off then, and when you get a situation where a team like Ipswich pretty much every season rests their squad and tries to concentrate on giving their best players a rest for the next league game because they've just played 4 games or whatever, it kind of says a lot. I find it sad, and I don't find it sad because I don't ever want to be in life. I don't want to be one of those people who's scared of change and always says, oh, the reason everything's rubbish nowadays is because it's not like it was when I was growing up, because I think that's a very easy trap for people to fall into. You have your time when you fall in love with football, music, movies, and yes, nothing will ever touch that, but you have to understand as an adult human being that things move on and things change and things get different. And if you'd have said when Gascoigne was going through his cup run, or Ian Wright, look at the names, Gascoigne, Ian Wright, Cantona, Ferguson, Wenger, Keane, Vieira, all the big names and the big moments at the end of the FA Cup were the biggest players. But if you'd have said when all that was happening, oh, but there's going to be this European competition, and you know we're going to see the greatest teams in Europe. I mean, hey, some people wouldn't care, but that's what's replaced it, and you just have to move with it. The analogy I always give is bonus print. You know, where you had to go and take your photographs and go and get your film developed, and now I'm literally filming a video of myself on a telephone hanging up in my car, attached to a USB cable that will never lose charge. And things move on and things change, and you just have to accept it. So as much as the FA Cup was a great thing, times change. Whether it will ever be great again, I don't know, but I don't think we should sit and mope, because things do move on. Okay, there's still some kind of romance, but I think all it comes from really now is the chance for a lower league team. And when I say a lower league team, I do mean a team that's probably in the 3rd or 4th tier, because frankly, if you give a Premier League team a draw against a Championship team, I think both sides find it a bit of a nuisance, really. They're kind of like, oh, well, we're going to get knocked out anyway, and you know, then the Premier League team still going to rest their players, and you know, so really it has some romance when, I don't know, Bradford City go and beat Chelsea like they did, but other than that, I suppose it's a chance for some fans of some teams to go to stadiums that they won't have been to, but really the meaning gets a little bit diminished when they go to that stadium and they don't get to see the true product that's normally served up week after week at that stadium. So today I'm going to see, I mean, Ipswich are splayed with injuries, but today I'm going to see pretty much, well, do you know, it won't be as much of a reserve team as normal with Ipswich because they've got so few players left, but I'm going to see basically Ipswich B versus Sheffield United B, and neither team really will be bothered. All they'll be bothered about is that they don't get a replay, that it's not a draw and you add an extra game onto the schedule. That's about the size of it for Ipswich. I don't know how it is for the club that you watch and are supporting, but yeah, that's the big FA Cup thing. I'd love Ipswich to win. I'd love Ipswich to get a few games, and obviously the draw that you'd want if you're an Ipswich fan, you'd want to go against Norwich, because Ipswich haven't beaten Norwich for ages, and you can be sure that one tie, other than one of the top 6 Premier League teams at Portman Road, that tie would really get the imagination going. If not, you'd want to win, and you'd want to, what would be the highest grossing game, either Arsenal or Spurs away, where Man United, where you can draw the biggest crowd and make the most money. That is what the FA Cup is now, and you might not like it, but change happens. It might change back for the better, and unfortunately you just have to move with it as a supporter, like all the managers and all the clubs have.